don't notice winter arriving at first. Not because it's gentle, but because it doesn't announce itself. There is no single morning where you wake up and think, "This is it, winter has begun." Instead, there are a few days where your hands hurt a little more than usual. A few evenings where the light disappears earlier than you expected. A few nights where the smoke lingers lower in the room and refuses to rise the way it used to. You tell yourself it's nothing. You always do. You are used to discomfort. Medieval life trains you for that early. Cold is not an emergency, it's a background condition. It exists the same way hunger exists, the same way soreness exists. It's not dramatic enough to deserve attention. Not yet. But slowly, without ceremony, the air changes its behavior. It stops forgiving mistakes. In summer, you can forget to close the door properly. You can linger outside a little too long. You can work barehanded and only feel a mild sting by the end of the day. Winter does not allow this. Winter remembers everything you failed to do. It collects small oversights and hands them back to you hours later, usually when you're trying to sleep. By the time you realize the season has shifted, it's already too late to prepare for it properly. Your house does not change. It is the same structure it always was. Low, cramped, and built with survival in mind, not comfort. The walls are thick, but thickness doesn't mean warmth. It just means the cold takes longer to move through them. The roof leaks smoke in strange directions. The floor is hard-packed earth, sometimes damp, sometimes frozen, always unforgiving. You don't heat rooms in winter. You heat points. There is the hearth, and there is everything else. You arrange your life around that distinction. Close enough to feel some benefit. Far enough away that you can still function. You learn the invisible boundary where warmth fades into cold, and you unconsciously avoid crossing it. At night, this boundary becomes smaller. The fire dies down faster than you'd like. Wood is precious now. You don't feed the flames just because you're uncomfortable. You feed them because you've decided you can afford to. There is a difference. You sit and watch the embers, calculating how long you can let them fade before the room becomes hostile. You do this calculation every night. Eventually, sleep becomes the cheaper option. You don't go to bed because you're tired. You go because lying still under layers of fabric and straw wastes less heat than sitting upright in the dark. Your body curls inward without you asking it to. Knees drawn up, shoulders hunched. You make yourself smaller, instinctively, like an animal trying to reduce its exposure. You sleep close to others. Not for companionship, for physics. Bodies share warmth. Even restless bodies. Even coughing bodies. Children press against adults. Adults press against walls that feel marginally less cold than the air. Sometimes animals are brought inside, not because it's hygienic, but because they are alive and warm and breathing. The smell becomes part of the season. Smoke, manure, damp wool, old food, and unwashed bodies mix into something permanent. Winter does not allow fresh air the way summer does. You can open a door, but you can't afford to keep it open. Ventilation is a luxury that trades warmth for cleanliness, and warmth wins every time. You breathe shallowly without realizing it. The night sounds change too. Wind is louder now, more intentional. It finds cracks you didn't know existed. It pushes against the structure and tests it, patiently. Wood creaks. Thatched roofing whispers. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs in a way that suggests this cough has been here before and intends to stay. Sleep is not deep. It is negotiated. You drift in short stretches, waking often, not because something is wrong, but because your body refuses to fully relax when the environment feels this hostile. You listen without meaning to. You feel the cold moving closer as the fire fades. You adjust a blanket that never quite covers everything it should. Time stretches strangely at night. There is no clock. There is only dark, and darker, and then eventually a slightly different dark that suggests morning is thinking about happening. You wake before dawn, not because you're rested, but because your body has decided it cannot afford to lose any more heat lying still. Getting up hurts. Your limbs resist movement. Joints feel swollen and incooperative. Your feet touch the floor and you immediately regret the decision. The cold travels upward fast, reminding you that the ground never forgets the night. You stand slowly. Everyone does. Rushing wastes energy, and energy is warmth. You move with caution, pulling on clothes that are already stiff from yesterday's dampness. Wool scratches. Linen offers little help. You layer anyway, knowing full well that layers are more psychological than effective. The fire needs attention again. It always does. You crouch by the hearth, blowing gently, coaxing embers back into relevance. Sometimes it works quickly, sometimes it doesn't. On bad mornings, you wait longer than you'd like, hands extended, watching your breath fog the air indoors. This is when winter feels personal. Not cruel, not dramatic, just unreasonably persistent. And this is only the beginning. The season will not get better for a long time. It will only get familiar. You will learn how to sleep inside it. How to wake inside it. How to work while pretending your fingers still belong to you. For now, though, you are simply cold. And you are learning, quietly, that this cold has plans to stay. The house does not wake with you. It never does. You rise into the morning with stiff joints and half-cooperative muscles, but the building remains exactly as it was through the night, cold, dark, and unimpressed by your effort. There is no retained warmth hiding in the corners. Whatever heat existed last evening has already left, seeping out through walls and roof with a patience that feels almost intentional. You built this place to last. You did not build it to be kind. The walls are thick, made of wattle and daub, or rough stone if you're lucky. They keep the structure standing through storms and years, but they don't seal. Air moves freely through them, slow and unstoppable. Cold does not rush in. It seeps. It settles. It makes itself comfortable before you've noticed it arrived. The ceiling is low. This was supposed to help. Less space to heat, less air to warm. In practice, it means smoke has nowhere useful to go. When the fire burns, it fills the room unevenly, curling and hanging instead of rising. Your eyes sting before your hands warm. Your throat feels dry long before your feet stop hurting. You learn to live inside the smoke. It stains everything. Roof beams darken. Walls grow sooty. Lungs adapt in ways they shouldn't have to. Coughing becomes common enough that no one comments on it. If someone isn't coughing, that's more noticeable. The floor offers no mercy. It is earth, tamped down by years of feet, animals, spilled water, and ash. In winter, it holds cold the way stone holds memories. Straw is spread, replaced occasionally, but it flattens quickly. Moisture lingers. Frost sometimes creeps inward, especially near the door. You avoid sitting on the ground if you can help it. Cold climbs upward. Everyone knows this, even if no one explains it. You perch on low benches or stools, lifting yourself just enough to feel marginally less punished by the floor. At night, you pile bedding higher, adding layers beneath you rather than on top. The walls are close enough to touch. This makes the room feel crowded even when it isn't. People sleep where they can. Children tuck themselves into corners. Adults claim spots they've learned leak less air. You remember which wall faces the wind. You remember which corner grows damp first. These are not preferences. They are survival notes. The door is a problem. It must exist, obviously. But every time it opens, winter steps inside with confidence. You feel it immediately, an aggressive push of cold air, sweeping low across the floor. You close the door quickly, sometimes too quickly, fingers numb and clumsy on the latch. There is no seal. Light seeps in around the edges during the day. Cold seeps in all the time. You hang cloth across it. Old sacks, worn fabric, anything that slows the air. It helps a little. Nothing helps much. The roof should protect you. It mostly does. Thatched roofs are thick, insulating in theory, but only if they're well maintained. Gaps develop. Rain finds its way in. In winter, moisture freezes and expands, making those gaps worse. Snow settles heavily, pressing down, adding weight you don't need. You listen to the roof at night. Not because you expect it to fail, but because you know it might. Wood creaks under the load. Thatch shifts. You lie awake for a moment, calculating whether the sound means anything or if it's just the house reminding you that it's working as hard as it can. Warmth cools badly. The fire warms the air directly above it. Heads feel light. Feet remain frozen. You rotate positions throughout the day without noticing, hands toward the hearth, then backs, then faces, like bread being turned to avoid burning. There is no even temperature. There is only proximity. You learn how far you can sit before the cold becomes unmanageable. You learn how long you can stay there. You drift inward and outward as needed, constantly adjusting, constantly negotiating with the space. At night, the house feels smaller. Not physically, but emotionally. Darkness presses inward. The cold makes everything feel closer, tighter. You become aware of every other body sharing the space. Every movement, every cough, every restless shift of straw. Privacy disappears first, then comfort, then patience. Still, the house does what it can. It keeps the wind from killing you outright. It keeps the snow off your face. It gives you walls to lean against when your legs are tired of carrying you. This is not nothing, but it is never enough. By midwinter, you stop expecting the house to help. You stop being disappointed by it. You accept its limitations the way you accept the limitations of your own body. Both are doing their best. And both are slowly losing heat. Night rearranges the space. What felt barely functional during the day becomes crowded once everyone lies down. The house does not grow, so you compress. Sleeping is not an individual activity here. It's collective, negotiated, and shaped by necessity rather than preference. You sleep where the warmth is. That usually means close to the hearth, even after the fire has faded to embers. Heat lingers there longest, clinging to stone and ash. You angle your body toward it, even though you know it won't last through the night. Bedding is simple. Straw mattresses, if you're lucky. Loose bundles of reeds or hay, tied and reused far longer than they should be. Over them, rough blankets. Wool, usually, heavy, itchy, and inconsistent. They trap some heat, but they also trap moisture, and dampness is winter's quiet accomplice. You arrange layers carefully, more beneath you than above. Pressure matters. Insulation works better when your weight compresses it. This is something you've learned through experience, not explanation. You don't think about it anymore. Your body remembers. Animals are brought inside. Not all of them. The valuable ones. A goat. A cow. Sometimes chickens tucked into baskets or corners. They shift and breathe and radiate warmth without realizing they're doing you a favor. The smell intensifies. Manure mixes with smoke and unwashed fabric. It's unpleasant, but it's also familiar. By winter, your nose has stopped objecting. Cleanliness is seasonal, and this is not the season for it. You position yourself carefully, too close to the animals and you risk being kicked, stepped on, or woken repeatedly. Too far away and you lose their heat. Everyone finds their compromise. Children are often placed nearest, not because they deserve comfort more, but because they need it to survive. Sleep comes in fragments. You drift off, then surface again, half aware. Someone coughs. Someone shifts. An animal snorts or stamps. The wind pushes at the walls, testing them again. You pull the blanket tighter, knowing it won't help much, but needing to do something. Your breath fogs the air. Indoors. You don't panic. You've seen this before. You adjust your position, tuck your chin down, try to reduce the space where cold can settle. Fire is never fully trusted. If it burns too long, it risks consuming wood you might need later. If it fades too quickly, the room becomes unlivable. You wake occasionally to tend it, adding just enough fuel to keep the embers alive. This is usually done by whoever sleeps closest. Tonight, that might be you. You rise reluctantly, moving slowly to avoid waking everyone else. The floor is colder than before. You crouch, blow gently, feed the fire a small piece of wood. Flames flicker briefly, then settle. You return to your place before the heat has time to travel. This is common. You don't resent it. Winter has made peace with these routines long before you arrived. Dreams are shallow. Your body does not fully surrender to sleep when warmth is uncertain. You dream of work, of movement, of places where your hands function properly. You wake unsure how much time has passed. Sometimes you wake because you're too cold. Sometimes because you're too hot near the dying fire. There is no perfect position. You learn to tolerate discomfort rather than eliminate it. Morning does not arrive gently. It announces itself through a change in darkness. A slight thinning. A suggestion. You open your eyes not because you're rested, but because staying still has become painful. Your limbs feel heavy. Muscles resist extension. Fingers ache as you flex them. You sit up slowly, breath shallow, bracing yourself against the cold air that has cooled overnight. Around you, others stir. Children whimper softly before they fully wake. Adults sigh. Animals shift, already restless. No one speaks yet. Speech wastes heat, and everyone is still negotiating with their body. The fire is almost gone. You knew it would be. You knew this night would end the same way all winter nights do, with cold, stiffness, and the quiet understanding that you will do this again tonight. And the night after that. Darkness runs the schedule. It always has. You don't notice this in summer, when light lingers and the day feels generous. In winter, the truth becomes unavoidable. The sun rises late, leaves early, and never seems fully committed while it's present. Everything you do bends around that fact. You don't decide when to sleep. The light does. As evening approaches, work slows, not because you're finished, but because your hands can no longer see what they're doing. Shadows stretch early, details blur, tools become dangerous. A misstep in daylight is a mistake. A misstep in darkness is an injury you cannot afford. You stop while you still can. Candles exist, but they are not for work. They are for moments. Brief, careful moments. Wax is valuable. Tallow smells and smokes. Either way, light is rationed. You don't burn it to extend productivity. You burn it to move safely or to mark something important. Most nights, you let darkness win. Supper is early, not because you're hungry then, but because it's the last chance to see the food you're eating. You gather near the hearth, bowls close to the fire, hands wrapped around whatever warmth the meal offers. Stew, if there is any. Thick bread, food chosen for endurance, not pleasure. Eating is quiet, not solemn, just efficient. You don't linger. Once the light fades, conversation thins. Stories shorten. Everyone is conserving something: energy, warmth, patience. Bedtime arrives without ceremony. You don't announce it. You drift toward it. Someone lies down first. Someone else follows. Eventually, the room rearranges itself into its night version. You sleep longer in winter. Not because you need more rest, but because there is nothing else to do safely. Darkness traps you inside your body. You wake in the night and consider rising, then remember there is nowhere to go that is warm or useful. So you stay still. This doesn't mean you sleep deeply. You wake often. You half-wake more often than that. Time loses shape. Hours blur. You sometimes think it's morning and sit up, only to realize the darkness hasn't changed at all. On rare nights, the moon helps. It spills pale light through cracks and openings, turning familiar shapes strange. You can see just enough to feel uneasy. Shadows stretch in ways you don't like. You pull the blanket tighter, preferring darkness to distortion. Morning is slow to assert itself. Light creeps back reluctantly, like it's unsure whether it should bother. You don't trust it at first. You wait for enough clarity to safely move, to recognize faces, to find the fire. Only then do you rise. Your body resents the timing. You wake cold, stiff, and already tired. Sleep has not restored you so much as caused the damage. You accept this without complaint. Complaints do not warm the room. The day begins late. By the time you can work properly, a significant portion of the daylight is already gone. This compresses everything. Tasks feel urgent even when they aren't. You rush where you shouldn't. You work through discomfort because waiting only makes things worse. The sun never climbs high. It skims the sky, offering light without warmth. Shadows remain long even at midday. You don't bother hoping it will improve. Hope is for seasons, not hours. As afternoon fades, you feel the pressure again. The quiet knowledge that whatever you haven't finished soon won't be finished today. Darkness will take it. You choose carefully what to attempt and what to leave. Evening closes in early. The cycle repeats. Light, such as it is, arrives. Leaves. Returns. Leaves again. You live inside these narrow windows, measuring your days not by clocks or calendars, but by how long you can see your hands. Winter does not rush you. It simply limits you, and in doing so, It teaches you when to stop. You trust layers more than you should. Not because they work especially well, but because there isn't much else to trust. Winter reduces your options quickly. You respond by adding fabric, straw, anything you can pile between yourself and the air. It feels proactive, even when it isn't effective. You wear everything you own. This is not an exaggeration. Tunic over tunic, wool over linen, sleeves pushed down, then pulled back up when circulation becomes a problem. Nothing fits quite right anymore. Clothing stiffens with dampness, creases permanently, and carries yesterday's cold into today. You don't change clothes often in winter. Drying takes too long. The fire can't spare the heat. Clean fabric is a future problem. For now, you focus on keeping what you're wearing functional. It rarely feels warm. At best, it feels less cold. Wool helps, in theory. It insulates even when damp. It traps air. It scratches. You accept all of this. Linen goes underneath, offering a thin barrier between skin and irritation, but it contributes almost nothing to warmth. You wrap yourself tightly. Belts cinch layers close. Gaps are enemies. Cold finds openings easily. Wrists, necks, ankles. You tie cloth around these points. Scarves, strips of fabric, anything that slows the air. Your hands suffer the most. Gloves exist, but they are clumsy and often impractical. You need your fingers to work. So you expose them, then hide them, then expose them again. They redden, ache, and eventually numb. You learn to work through it. Feet are worse. Shoes are thin. Soles wear down. Straw stuffing helps briefly, then flattens and holds moisture. You change it when you can. Sometimes you can't. You stomp occasionally, not for warmth, but to reassure yourself that sensation still exists. At night, blankets take over. They are heavy and insufficient. You layer them anyway, stacking weight and hoping pressure will trap heat. Some nights it almost works. Other nights, it doesn't. You adjust constantly, pulling fabric tighter, tucking edges under your body, rolling slightly to warm one side, then the other. You wake to find your face exposed, nose cold, breath fogging the air inches away. Straw beds promise more than they deliver. Fresh straw is warm, briefly. It insulates from the ground, slightly. Over time, it compacts, absorbs moisture, and becomes another cold surface. You turn it, fluff it, replace it when possible. Winter makes replacement difficult. Everything takes longer. Everything costs more effort. You learn small tricks. Sleeping on your side rather than your back. Curling inward. Keeping extremities tucked close to your core. Sharing blankets when possible. These are not secrets. Everyone knows them. They help, marginally. Nothing solves the problem. You stop expecting to be warm. This is the quiet adjustment winter demands. You recalibrate comfort. You stop chasing it. You aim instead for tolerable, for survivable, for not actively painful. When someone mentions warmth, it's usually hypothetical. Stories of summer, of sun, of work that ends with sweat instead of numbness. You listen politely, but it feels distant, like a different life. Night stretches again. You settle into your layers, feeling the familiar disappointment as they fail to create the barrier you hoped for. You close your eyes anyway. Rest, even imperfect, is still rest. Morning will come. Cold will still be here. And you will put the same layers back on, knowing exactly how little they will help, and wearing them anyway. Winter nights are louder than you expect. Not with voices or movement, but with the constant, low-level noise of things reacting to cold. Wood contracts. Thatch shifts. Wind presses, releases, presses again. The house speaks all night, whether you want it to or not. You learn its language. You know which creak means nothing. Which one means the wind has changed direction. Which sound suggests snow sliding from the roof, and which suggests something heavier settling where it shouldn't. These sounds do not alarm you. They interrupt you. Sleep never quite deepens enough to ignore them. You drift, surface, drift again. Each noise pulls you just far enough toward waking that rest remains incomplete. Inside, breathing is uneven. Someone wheezes softly in their sleep. Someone coughs, pauses, then coughs again. These are not sudden sounds. They are familiar rhythms, repeated night after night, until they blend into the background. Occasionally, a cough is different. Deeper, wetter, more persistent. You notice, even half asleep. Everyone does. No one comments. Winter illnesses are expected. Concern doesn't make them leave faster. The fire makes its own noises. Embers shift. Ash collapses. A log cracks quietly, releasing a brief flicker of light. You open your eyes just long enough to check that it's still contained, then close them again. Light is rare at night. Even when the fire flares, it doesn't illuminate much. Shapes loom. Corners stay dark. Your mind fills in what your eyes cannot confirm. This is uncomfortable, but normal. Animals contribute their share. A cow shifts its weight. A goat stamps or snorts. Chickens rustle in baskets. These sounds are oddly reassuring. Living things making noise means warmth still exists in the room. Silence, when it arrives, feels wrong. It usually means the fire has died completely, or that everyone has fallen into a shallow, synchronized stillness that doesn't last long. The wind is the most persistent. It finds its way through cracks and seams, producing a constant, shifting whistle. Sometimes it hums. Sometimes it rattles loose pieces of wood or thatch. It feels deliberate, like the cold is searching. You pull the blanket tighter. Not because it helps, but because it's a reflex. A response to vulnerability. Sleep fractures around these sounds. You don't remember dreams clearly in winter. They dissolve quickly, replaced by the awareness of cold, stiffness, and noise. You wake unsure whether something actually happened or if you imagined it. Time stretches again. Without light, minutes and hours lose distinction. You mark the night by interruptions rather than progression. Each waking feels like a reset. Eventually, you stop trying to count. Morning approaches quietly. There is no sudden change, just a gradual thinning of the darkness. The sounds soften. Wind settles, or perhaps you've grown used to it. Someone stirs. An animal shifts. You open your eyes before you need to. Your body has learned not to stay still too long. Cold punishes immobility. Even rest becomes something to manage carefully. Another night has passed. Not comfortably, not peacefully, but successfully. You wake before warmth exists. Not because you want to, but because your body has reached its limit. Lying still has become counterproductive. Muscles ache from inactivity. Cold has settled deep enough that remaining where you are feels worse than moving. So you sit up, slowly. Movement is deliberate now. Sudden motions pull at stiff joints and send sharp reminders through your back and shoulders. You pause halfway upright, letting your body decide whether this is a good idea. It rarely is. Your breath fogs again as you exhale. Indoors. You take a moment to feel your fingers, flexing them carefully. Sensation returns unevenly, pins and needles blooming and fading. Around you, others wake the same way. No one springs up. No one stretches dramatically. Winter has taught everyone to conserve effort. Groans are quiet. Movements are small. The room fills with the soft sounds of reluctant bodies negotiating with the morning. The floor is waiting. You delay touching it as long as you can. When you finally stand, the cold travels up fast, through thin soles and into your legs. You pause again, letting the initial shock pass before attempting another step. This is routine. You pull on clothes that never fully dried. Fabric is stiff, cold to the touch. Wool scratches more in winter, or perhaps you're just less patient. You layer anyway, knowing that whatever warmth you gain will be temporary. The fire is barely alive. You knew it would be. You crouch by the hearth, hands outstretched, blowing gently into the ash. Sometimes embers glow in response. Sometimes they don't. You add a small piece of wood, then wait. Waiting is uncomfortable. You balance on the balls of your feet to keep them off the cold ground. You hunch your shoulders to protect your chest. You watch for flame like it's a negotiation rather than a guarantee. When it finally catches, the relief is disproportionate. Not because it makes you warm, but because it promises that warmth is possible. Eventually, others gather nearby, drawn by habit. Children hover close. Animals shift, sensing the change. The room rearranges itself back into its daytime version. Morning tasks begin immediately, not because you're ready, but because delaying them won't make them easier. You fetch water that's painfully cold to the touch. You break ice where it's formed. You handle tools with fingers that still don't quite respond. Everything takes longer. Buttons resist. Knots are harder to untie. Small tasks require more attention than they should. You grow frustrated, then suppress it. Frustration wastes energy. Food is simple. Whatever remains from last night, reheat it if possible. Warmth matters more than flavor. You eat slowly, letting heat spread where it can. Outside, daylight is thin. The sun offers light without comfort. You step into the cold knowing it will not improve. Work waits, indifferent to temperature. You brace yourself. This is how every winter day begins. Already tired, already cold, already behind. You do not dwell on this. Dwelling serves no purpose. You move forward because that is the only option that exists. The cold does not stay in one place. Once you step outside, it moves with intention. It grips exposed skin first, then works inward, tightening muscles and dulling sensation. Mornings are the worst. The ground is hardest. The air feels heavier, sharper, as if it resists being breathed. You move carefully. Your body has not fully woken yet. Muscles are stiff, joints reluctant. Each step feels deliberate, as though you're reminding your legs how this works. You don't rush. Falling in winter is not just painful, it's dangerous. The ground crunches or slips beneath you. Frost coats everything. Mud has frozen into uneven ridges. Paths you know well become unfamiliar hazards. You watch your footing constantly, eyes down, shoulders hunched. Hands are a problem again. You need them to work, but they object to the temperature. Fingers ache, then go numb, then ache again as blood tries to return. You flex them repeatedly, blowing warm breath into your palms when you can spare a moment. It never lasts. Tools feel different in winter. Wooden handles are colder, heavier. Metal bites immediately. You avoid touching it directly if possible, wrapping cloth around grips or using gloves briefly, then removing them when dexterity is needed. Work begins anyway. It always does. Fields don't disappear in winter. Animals still need care. Wood still needs chopping. Repairs cannot wait for warmth. You do what must be done, even as your body protests each movement. Movement helps, eventually. Once you've been working for a while, warmth spreads unevenly through your limbs. You sweat just enough to be uncomfortable, then stop, knowing that sweat in winter is another risk. Dampness turns dangerous quickly, so you regulate yourself constantly. Work, pause, adjust layers, work again. This rhythm becomes second nature. Your back complains. Lifting feels heavier than it should. Bending sends sharp reminders through stiff muscles. You adjust posture without thinking, protecting joints that have already learned their limits. You are slower in winter. Everyone is. No one comments on it. Speed is not expected. Survival is. You measure progress differently now, not by how much you accomplish, but by how little damage the day does to you. The cold never fully leaves. Even when you're warm from effort, it waits. The moment you stop moving, it returns, creeping back into fingers, toes, and thoughts. You learn to anticipate this. Breaks are short. Stillness is minimized. You lean against walls only briefly. You keep weight shifting from foot to foot. By midday, light fades again. The sun barely clears the horizon before it begins its retreat. Shadows stretch long and early. You feel the pressure return, the quiet reminder that time is limited. You push through, not heroically, just steadily. By the time you head back inside, your body is exhausted in a specific, winter way. Not the satisfying tiredness of summer labor, but a deep, aching fatigue that feels earned and unavoidable. You welcome the fire, even though you know it will not solve anything. Food is meant to help. In winter, it mostly just keeps you from getting worse. Meals are heavier now, thicker, designed to stay with you rather than please you. There is less variety and more repetition. What you eat is determined less by desire and more by what survived the autumn. Bread is everywhere, dense, dark, and filling. It takes effort to chew when your jaw is already tired from the cold. You eat it anyway. You soak it when you can, softening it in broth or ale, making it easier to swallow and slightly warmer. Stew becomes important. Whatever vegetables were stored successfully. Whatever grains remain. Occasionally meat, stretched thin. Everything is boiled together, not for flavor, but efficiency. Heat transfers better through liquid. Warm food matters more than good food. You eat close to the fire. Always. You angle your body toward it, hands wrapped around bowls, letting warmth seep into your fingers. The first few bites are the best, not because they taste good, but because they momentarily quiet the cold inside you. It doesn't last. Calories help, but they don't replace warmth immediately. You feel fuller before you feel better. The energy arrives later, when you're already working again, when it's harder to notice. Hunger behaves differently in winter. It's quieter, more constant. Sharp hunger fades, replaced by a low-level emptiness that never quite goes away. You stop expecting satisfaction. You aim for enough. Children feel it first. They eat quickly, then hover near the fire, seeking warmth more than food. Adults notice and adjust portions subtly. No one announces it. These decisions happen without discussion. Food storage shapes your days. You are always aware of how much remains. How fast it's going. How many weeks of winter are still ahead. You do mental calculations you never speak aloud. Sometimes, you're wrong. Meals are smaller on those days. There is little ceremony. Eating is functional. Bowls are scraped clean. Nothing is wasted. Warmth from the fire fades quickly once the meal is over, and you feel it immediately. Your body works harder now. Digesting takes energy. You feel heavier after eating, but also slightly more capable. It's a narrow window. You use it to work, not to rest. Illness lurks quietly. Cold weakens you slowly. Nutrition suffers. Small deficiencies accumulate. You don't know the words for them, but you feel the effects. Fatigue that lingers, wounds that heal slowly, aches that don't quite fade. You accept this as normal. Winter reframes expectations. Feeling well is temporary. Feeling unwell is common. You judge health by whether you can still work, not by how you feel doing it. Evening meals are earlier. Darkness returns, and with it, the familiar compression of time. You eat while you can see, while the fire still offers something. Afterward, there is a pause. A moment where you consider resting, then decide against it. Stillness invites cold. You stay active just long enough to delay it. Food has done what it can. It has not fixed winter. It has simply allowed you to continue inside it. Illness does not announce itself in winter. It blends in. Cold, fatigue, and pain are already present, so when sickness arrives, it feels less like an intrusion and more like an intensification. A cough deepens. A joint swells a little more than usual. A fever warms you briefly, then leaves you weaker than before. You rarely stop working. Stopping is reserved for the kind of illness that makes movement impossible. Everything else is tolerated. You learn to judge your body by function rather than comfort. If you can stand, you work. If you can lift, you lift. Winter encourages this logic. Rest does not feel restorative when the room is cold. Lying still can make symptoms worse. So you move, even when you shouldn't, because movement creates heat, and heat feels like relief. Coughs are everywhere. Dry ones, wet ones, persistent ones that echo through the night. You stop noticing most of them. Only new sounds attract attention, and even then, briefly. Children get sick often. They are smaller, lose heat faster, recover slower. Adults watch carefully without appearing to. Extra food is offered when possible. Extra time near the fire. Extra layers at night. Not everyone recovers. This is understood without being spoken. Infections linger longer in winter. Wounds heal poorly. What would be a minor injury in summer can turn serious when cold and damp interfere. You clean what you can. You hope. Hope is quiet in winter. There are remedies. Herbs, teas, poultices. You use what you know, what was passed down. Some help, some don't. You don't have the luxury of knowing which in advance. Fever is complicated. It brings warmth, which feels good, but also weakness, which doesn't. You sweat, then chill. You adjust layers constantly, trying to balance two problems that refuse to cooperate. The community absorbs illness. Work is redistributed when necessary. Someone else takes over a task. Not out of kindness, but practicality. Everyone understands that winter requires cooperation to function at all. Death is not dramatic. When it happens, it is usually quiet. Someone weakens. Someone fails to recover. There is mourning, but it is restrained. Winter does not allow excess emotion. There is still work to be done. You note the absence. A place near the fire left empty. A voice not coughing anymore. These details linger more than ceremonies. Survival continues. Illness becomes background noise, like the cold. You stop asking whether it will happen and start asking whether you can endure it if it does. Most of the time, you do. Not comfortably, but adequately. Fire is never taken for granted. In winter, it stops being a convenience and becomes a responsibility that follows you through the day. You do not simply have fire. You manage it. You calculate around it. You worry about it when it isn't visible. Wood is counted carefully. Every log burned is one less for later. You remember how much you have stored. You remember how fast it disappeared last winter. You remember the cold nights near the end, when you stretched embers longer than you should have. You don't feed the fire freely. You feed it deliberately, small pieces first, then slightly larger ones once it's established. You watch how quickly they burn, adjusting your choices. Too much, and you waste fuel. Too little, and the fire never warms enough to matter. Ash builds up. You clear it regularly, not for cleanliness, but because it smothers embers if ignored. Even this task exposes you to cold. You work quickly, hands stiff, knowing the fire will weaken briefly afterward. Smoke is constant. It fills the room unevenly, depending on wind and fuel. Your eyes water. Your throat tightens. You cough and keep going. Proper chimneys are rare. Smoke is an accepted cost of warmth. Fire demands attention at night. You wake to check it, not always consciously. Sometimes you sit up before realizing why. You listen for the sound of dying embers. You add wood reluctantly, measuring how long you need it to last. You learn to stretch heat, raking embers together, covering them with ash to slow their death, banking the fire so it survives until morning. These techniques are passed down quietly, refined through experience. Sometimes they fail. You wake to a dead hearth and a room that feels hostile. Restarting the fire in full cold is harder. You curse quietly and begin again. Fire dictates where people gather. Everyone drifts toward it instinctively. Arguments happen near it. Meals are eaten near it. Sick people are placed closest. Space is not distributed evenly, it follows heat. Animals understand this too. They angle their bodies toward the hearth, positioning themselves just close enough to benefit without risking sparks. Their warmth becomes part of the calculation. Fire is work. It costs time, fuel, attention, and comfort. It gives back warmth unevenly and temporarily. You resent it occasionally, then feel foolish for doing so. Without it, winter would win much faster. You end each day thinking about tomorrow's fire. How much wood remains. How early you'll need to tend it. Whether it will survive the night. It is never finished. Work does not pause for winter. It narrows, changes shape, becomes heavier in some places and slower in others, but it never disappears. Survival depends on continuing, and winter is not interested in excuses. You adjust your tasks. Fields demand less, but animals demand more. Repairs that could wait in summer must be done now before cold worsens the damage. Tools are cleaned and mended because replacing them is not an option. You work indoors when possible. Spinning, mending, preparing supplies. These tasks keep your hands moving and your body warm enough to function. They also test patience. Light is poor. Fingers are stiff. Mistakes happen more easily. Outdoor work still exists. Wood must be gathered. Water fetched. Animals fed. Snow does not remove these needs. It complicates them. Paths disappear. Ice forms. You plan carefully to minimize trips. You move in groups more often. Not for company, but efficiency. 2 people complete tasks faster, reducing exposure. Someone watches footing while the other works. Cooperation is practical, not sentimental. Time feels compressed. Days are short. Tasks stack up. You choose what must be done and what can wait. Some things wait too long. Cold punishes hesitation. Standing still to think invites numbness. You decide quickly and accept imperfection. A crooked repair is better than no repair. Your body adapts reluctantly. Muscles strengthen in strange ways. Pain becomes familiar. You learn which aches to ignore and which signal real trouble. This knowledge is hard-earned and rarely discussed. Fatigue is constant. Not the exhaustion that demands rest, but the kind that settles in and stays. You carry it with you, adjusting expectations rather than fighting it. You take breaks strategically, near the fire, brief, just long enough to restore movement. Long rests feel dangerous. Stillness cools you faster than you expect. As daylight fades, urgency returns. You rush to finish what you can see. Tools are put away early to avoid accidents. Darkness forces an end, whether you are ready or not. Work follows you inside. There is always something to do near the hearth. Sorting, planning, quiet preparation for tomorrow. Hands move even when bodies are tired. Winter teaches endurance, not dramatic endurance. Quiet, repetitive endurance. The kind that looks unimpressive but accumulates over time. You do not feel heroic. You feel persistent. Sleep fragments itself. You do not enter it smoothly. Night is no longer a single stretch of rest. It is a series of pauses, brief awakenings, and half-conscious adjustments. Each interruption has a reason: cold, hunger, shifting animals, or the faintest worry that the fire is dying. You wake because it's cold. Not sharply. A gradual realization. Fingers stiffen. Toes go numb. You shift position, pull blankets tighter, hug your knees. It is never enough. The cold seeps through layers, testing limits you didn't know you had. You wake because of hunger. A low, gnawing emptiness that won't leave. You could eat, but it is inconvenient. Perhaps there is food, perhaps not. You lie awake, weighing the effort against the discomfort. Often, you decide to wait. You wake because of responsibility. Even half asleep, your mind monitors the room. Someone coughs. An ember shifts. Animals stir. You react instinctively, adjusting bodies, blankets, or fire before fully opening your eyes. Each awakening is brief, sometimes long enough to remember frustration, sometimes long enough to convince yourself the night is nearly over. You return to sleep only partially. Dreams dissolve instantly. Consciousness hovers nearby, ready to respond again. Your body refuses comfort. Even when you curl tightly under layers, it still demands attention. Fingers and toes are reminders of your mortality. Your back protests against straw and stiffness. Headaches or lingering aches whisper from yesterday's exertion. You adjust repeatedly, rolling over, lifting, lowering. Hands tucked, untucked, arms crossed, uncrossed. You act without thinking, guided by habit and necessity. Sleep accommodates these micro-movements, but never fully heals you. Silence is deceptive. Even when the room seems still, the mind anticipates noise. Each small sound, wind, animals, someone breathing, pulls you closer to waking. You adapt by remaining partially alert all night, a survival mechanism you barely notice. You measure time differently. Night is not hours. It is interruptions. Each cycle of waking, adjusting, dozing becomes a marker. By the time morning light approaches, you feel as though more than one night has passed, even if only hours have. Morning comes reluctantly. When it does, you are already weary. The fire may be dim. The floor may be cold. Your body aches in familiar ways. You rise with the knowledge that the night's fragmented sleep has not fully restored you, yet you have little choice but to continue. Winter conditions have trained you, not to rest perfectly, but to survive imperfectly. Sleep is an unreliable ally, but you have learned to coexist with it. You move between wakefulness and dozing, aware at all times that stillness invites danger, cold, stiffness, or wasted energy. Even exhaustion feels controlled. You know the patterns. You know when to give in and when to resist. Each night, each awakening, is predictable in its unpredictability. You endure it without dramatic complaint, because endurance is required, not comfort. Winter days stretch thin. Light becomes precious. Not just a tool for seeing, but a fragile promise that the world hasn't completely stopped. You measure your hours by it, not by clocks or chores, because neither is reliable in the cold. The sun barely rises, and when it does, it offers little warmth. You are awake long before it arrives, and often long after it retreats. You wait for it quietly. Outside, shadows dominate. Paths you walked yesterday feel unfamiliar. Frost coats everything, and the sun's faint presence does little to melt it. You plan your day around light, organizing tasks so that the most dangerous or precise work happens when you can at least see it. Any miscalculation costs more than energy, it costs safety. Inside, the fire tries to compensate. It radiates warmth, yes, but it does not replace light. The flickering glow illuminates only parts of the room. Hands near it are functional, hands farther away are useless. You shift constantly, rotating tasks and people to keep those who must work within reach of its rays. Hope becomes small. You do not think of spring or summer. Those seasons are distant, almost mythical. Instead, your hope is limited to daylight lasting a few minutes longer than yesterday. To seeing the floor without stumbling. To watching snow begin to melt, just a little, under the sun's weak authority. Tasks are dictated by light, not desire. You cannot ignore the cold, but it is easier to endure in action. Feeding animals, repairing tools, chopping wood, these things take on disproportionate importance. Doing them while the sun is present feels like a small victory. Miss the window, and you either risk injury or work in darkness, which accomplishes less and frustrates more. The body adapts, reluctantly. Your eyes strain constantly, adjusting to dim light. Your muscles remain tense, anticipating uneven surfaces and frozen ground. Each step outside or across the yard is calculated. Misjudgment carries immediate consequences. You move slowly, deliberately, aware of how little the world protects you. Even indoors, light is precious. Windows are small and drafty. Thin sheets of fabric cover them, trapping warmth but dimming illumination. You arrange your work near openings where light penetrates, adjusting positions repeatedly as the sun shifts or clouds pass. Tasks stretch longer because you must pause whenever shadows overtake your hands. Hope is measured in minutes. The sun climbs slowly, then sinks just as fast. You cherish the time you have, not in joy, but in pragmatism. Everything else, the cold, the hunger, the fatigue, remains unchanged. Only the sun offers the illusion of control. You begin to internalize it. Days have no real rhythm beyond light. You wake before it, work while it lasts, retreat when it fades. Sleep fills the remaining hours, fragmented and shallow. The cycle is relentless, repetitive, and unyielding. Waiting becomes the closest thing to a reward winter provides. Even when sunlight arrives, it is insufficient. Its rays penetrate only a fraction of the cold that clings to the world and your body. You move with precision, using light not for comfort but for survival. Any deviation risks harm. Any misstep is felt immediately in hands, feet, and spine. You learn patience the hard way. Winter teaches the quiet endurance of waiting, waiting for warmth, for light, for the small victories that make the day tolerable. Each minute of sun, however brief, is a victory over darkness, a small reprieve from endless fatigue, and a reminder that survival depends not on force but on attentiveness. Even hope is measured carefully. It is never large, never certain. It exists only as long as the day allows, and you live inside that sliver of light with the knowledge that the next moment may undo everything.